No, Gragson will not race this weekend at Sonoma due to concussion-like symptoms, and NASCAR could be returning to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve as early as 2024. What's going, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about the Chicago White Sox. As it was announced yesterday, the Chicago White Sox will sponsor Ty Dillon at Chicago Street Course. I think it's the first time in a long time we've seen MLB sponsorship in NASCAR, so really cool to see that the White Sox are going to be sponsoring Ty Dillon. Maybe if Kurt Busch decides to come back, the Cubs could maybe sponsor at Chicago Street Course. Be really cool to see, but nonetheless, really awesome to see the Chicago White Sox are going to sponsor Ty Dillon at the Street Course race. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Camaro. As Chevy announced yesterday, there will be 56 editions of the 2024 Camaro 24 Garage 56 edition. This is really cool that they are doing it. The car looks absolutely amazing, looks absolutely incredible, and I'm glad to see that Camaro is going to be doing that going into this year. I love that they're doing that, and it's really exciting to see, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about the Sonoma Purse money for this weekend. As every single week we have a NASCAR Cup Xfinity Series or truck race, Bob Pockus puts out the purse money. And according to him for the Cup race, it's $8,054,721. And for the Xfinity Series race, it's $1,545,934. That's a pretty decent purse money for this weekend. Obviously, the Cup Series is always going to have the most money, considering the fact that basically they have the charter system, and plus I think maybe some extra entries this weekend as well. So it's pretty good money for this weekend, and that is a purse money for the upcoming race at Sonoma. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Daniel Ricciardo. As it was announced yesterday, Daniel Ricciardo has struck a deal with ESPN. They'll have some Manning-style broadcast on ESPN. He'll be doing Will Arnett for 3 races this year with the F1 races. It'll be this upcoming weekend for the Canadian Grand Prix at Montreal. It'll be at Coda and also Las Vegas as well. There's been a lot of rumors this was going to end up happening, that they have been trying to work with Daniel Ricciardo to have something like this happen. And I think this is really big for Formula 1 overall. This is something that they are going to end up doing. So nonetheless, really excited about that and glad that they are doing this, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Craft Analytics Group. As it was announced yesterday, NASCAR has hired KAGR to help with decision making in regards to wrecks, among other things. Obviously, we've talked a lot about situations with driver retaliations and SMT data and all that stuff. Craft Analytics Group is going to be there to help when it comes to that. I think this is a really big hire, a really big pickup. Nonetheless, really glad to see that they've picked up Craft Analytics Group, and I think it's going to help a lot when it comes to decision making, among other things. This is a big pickup for NASCAR, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to go ahead and talk about Amazon. As it was announced on Wednesday that NASCAR struck a deal with Amazon Prime to shoot a documentary around Garage 56 and around their time in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. I believe this has been probably going on for a very long time, but this is really huge to see that Amazon is working with NASCAR, and I think this really confirms a pretty big thing that Amazon is likely going to be on NASCAR's next TV deal. We've talked about this on the channel quite a bit, that Amazon's been the most rumored streaming service. There's obviously rumors as well that the Xfinity Series might be added to Amazon for the full season. Xfinity also may not be the sponsor of the secondary series, and Amazon might take over the sponsorship and probably will pay teams a lot more when it comes to that, because the deal is likely going to be done within the next month. They're talking maybe around July 4th or the middle of July is when the deal could end up getting done, and it could be announced in the coming months. I think this really plays that theory and plays into that role that Amazon is going to come back. This is really cool, though, to see, and glad to see that Amazon is working with NASCAR for the Garage 56 entry. And like I said, I think this confirms everything that we know that they are going to return. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chris Hacker. As it was announced on Wednesday when the Eric Jones penalty was announced, it was also announced that Chris Hacker, the O2 team, have been handed 25-point penalties and other point penalties for window net violations once again. If I'm not mistaken, Young's Motorsports already have window net violations this year. I think that came after Charlotte, if I'm not mistaken. And now this is already the second time of the year this team has been affected by the window net violations. I do not believe that Young's Motorsports is going to appeal those penalties, but you've got to get your window nets updated. If you can't keep those updated, you're going to go ahead and get penalties. And NASCAR said you got to keep them with a certain amount of years. I know Young's Motorsports doesn't have the biggest budget and the biggest amount of money. Nonetheless, though, they need to get it updated so everything is up to date and set and ready to go. And they've been handed a penalty. I'm not surprised by this. It sucks for that team, but I'm not really surprised because it's not the first time that this team has been affected by the winter net situation, and they need to get it resolved really, really soon and really quickly. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Zipadelli. This week in Sonoma, Jonathan Toney will not be at the racetrack due to feeling under the weather. So Greg Zipadelli is going to be returning to the crew chief box and will crew chief for Cole Custer in the Xfinity Series race tomorrow at Sonoma. Greg Zipadelli, of course, a two-time champion as a crew chief, though he hasn't crew chief a lot over the last 10 to 15 years. I think the last time Zipadelli crew chief in the Cup Series back, I think either in 2011 or 2012 were the early days of when Logano was basically the driver of that 20 car. So it's been a while since Greg Zipadelli has been a crew chief on the box. I'm not sure how he's going to do, but he's got a good driver there. Cole Custer's coming off a really great stretch. He just picked up the most recent win at Portland. So I think that we're going to see him do a solid job. Hopefully he can help out Cole Custer, and Cole can have a really strong run this weekend. Nonetheless, they've got a legend coming back. This guy, a lot of people probably would consider a NASCAR Hall of Famer due to his legendariness as a crew chief, being two-time champion as a crew chief. But nonetheless, really glad to see that he will be the crew chief, and hopefully he can do a really good job as a crew chief this weekend for Cole Custer Sonoma. Hopefully he can do a really awesome and a really good job this weekend. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Christian Rose. As it was announced yesterday that Christian Rose will drive the 22 for AM Racing this weekend later this year and will make his debut at Richmond. Christian Rose currently drives the 32 for AM Racing in ARCA, and if I'm going to be honest, Christian Rose has struggled, but I don't think they put as much funding into the ARCA program as they do in the Xfinity Series program or the Truck Series program. What's also interesting, we've seen a couple times this year that AM Racing has not entered. But I think this is a pretty cool opportunity for Christian Rose. I believe he's also going to be making his NASCAR Xfinity Series debut either at Atlanta or another race down the road in the future. So he might be doing a doubleheader during the Richmond weekend. Nonetheless, so this is a really cool opportunity for Christian Rose. Hopefully he can do a really good job in that number 22 truck. This is a good opportunity for him. Hopefully he can do a really good job with AM Racing later this year at Richmond in about a month or two from now. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Ryan Hunter-Reay. As it had been announced yesterday that Ryan Hunter-Reay is going to replace Connor Daly starting this upcoming and next weekend and will drive the number 20 Fred Carpenter Racing starting at Road America. Now, obviously we haven't really talked about this, but Connor Daly was announced on Wednesday that he will not be returning to Ed Carpenter Racing. Despite bringing sponsorship funding from BitNile and a couple other companies, he will not be in that car due to the lack of performance. So they're bringing in a champion of IndyCar, the 2013 or 2012 IndyCar champion of Ryan Hunter-Reay into this Carpenter Racing to try to help the organization overall. Look, I'm really disappointed for Connor Daly. He's not going to be driving for Ed Carpenter Racing anymore, but I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to work on getting the performance to be a lot better. But I'll be honest, I thought it was going to be Linus Lundqvist and not Ryan Hunter-Reay because I think Ryan Hunter-Reay, don't get me wrong, I think Ryan Hunter-Reay still was one of the greatest IndyCar drivers ever, but Ryan Hunter-Reay has not raced a lot as much recently, and I think it is a cool opportunity to see he's going to try to help the team. I thought he'd come in as like more of a managerial role and really try to get the team up to speed and build the team up from the ground up. But at the same token, same time, to have him back in IndyCar is really fun. I imagine he'll be in that car the rest of the season, and I think Ryan will do a very, very solid job. He did have a decent performance with Dry Ryan Bull Racing. Didn't have the race-winning pace in the Indy 500, but had some pretty good speed in the test sessions. So I think Ryan Hunter-Reay, how good of a driver he is, I think he's going to be a really big help to make the team stronger and better. So nonetheless, really glad to see that Ryan Hunter-Reay is back in the IndyCar series, and hopefully he can do a really good job with the team. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about Garage 56. Now, starting, I believe, tomorrow, we have the 24 Hours of Le Mans. And one of the things that has been talked about is a Garage 56 entry. We have seen a lot of attention on social media in regards to this. You go to TikTok and there's millions of views for this Garage 56 entry. And why is this a big deal? Well, NASCAR is hitting the streets of Le Mans, and of course, they're going to have Jimmy Johnson, Jenson Button, and Mike Rockefeller in that car. And one of the biggest goals of Garage 56 was to show NASCAR on the world stage. And so far, they have done that with millions of views on TikTok and how much attention it has been. It's been great to see. Now, this car is going to be starting at the back of the LMP2 class. I don't think it's going for overall classification, if I'm not mistaken, and it's not going for a win. It's just there to be innovative. The goal for the Garage 56 car is to basically last all 24 hours, and if they can do that, that is a huge accomplishment and a huge deal for NASCAR, because if this car succeeds in that front and in that aspect, this could have some pretty big implications going forward into the future of NASCAR, whether endurance races do come into play for NASCAR. Yes, they do have IMSA, but this could be a really big factor in the future of the sport. So nonetheless, I'm really looking forward to this. I'm excited tomorrow. I love it. Hope this car can do really, really good. They've got some good drivers, a NASCAR Cup Series legend. You've got Jensen Button, a Formula One legend, also Mike Rockefeller, a sports car legend. You've got a really strong combination, a really strong lineup this year, and just seeing the recognition that this car has gotten is phenomenal and also absolutely incredible. So I'm excited about it. I'm looking forward to it and glad to see it is getting attention on TikTok. It's really big for the sport and glad to see it is getting attention. Really exciting stuff for sure to see. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Joey Logano. Now, Joey Logano does have a show in Series 7 NASCAR. I think it's called Behind the Wheel. And Joey Logano says that no racetrack on the Cup Series schedule should have more than one race at that track per season. It's a very interesting topic. He also talks about schedule diversity. He says that there should be a lot more talk about schedule diversity going into 2024 schedule and beyond. I do mostly agree with Joey Logano. I don't 100% agree, but I mostly agree. The only exceptions to this rule that I'd like to see, in my honest opinion, are basically having only a couple tracks have 2 days, that being Daytona, Talladega, and if they can get the next-gen car right, Martinsville. Other than that, I think that basically every single track should only have 1 day. And because one, you like he mentioned, you get more schedule diversity. You've got the opportunity maybe go to more racetracks and break tracks like Chicago and Speedway back on the schedule. And either Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, which we're going to talk about here at the end of this episode. I think this is a really, really big move overall that they are likely going to have that they need to do. And I think that Joey Logano will probably have a role maybe in helping with the schedule in some aspect. We don't know. But I think Joey Logano is absolutely right in this section. I think they definitely do need to consider having less race because I think the more racetracks you have, it's better. And also look at sellouts. Well, a lot of tracks have cut down to 1 day, and it's actually helped these racetracks have more potential sellouts. Look at Pocono. Pocono sold out last year. It wouldn't have done that if they had 2 dates. Look at Michigan. Michigan's been having the biggest crowds they've had in a long time because they've cut back down to 1 day. Every track, in my opinion, should only have 1 day because you're going to have potential more schedule diversity and also more likely better attendance at those racetracks. And no track should have more than 2 days. A lot of tracks have 2. And personally, many of the tracks, maybe except a couple, should only have 1 date, in my opinion. I think Joey Logano is absolutely correct in most aspects. And hopefully NASCAR does listen to Logano and they decide to cut a little bit back on the schedule for more diversity and more potential tracks that could be added on the schedule. I agree with Joey Logano wholeheartedly, and I think that that is what's going to happen going forward into the foreseeable future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the next-gen car. Now, NASCAR announced yesterday some pretty significant safety updates to the next-gen car. NASCAR is making updates, of course, and these changes are going to debut later this year, and they're going to become mandatory at Atlanta Motor Speedway. These changes are going to be to the front bumper and to the front clip of the car. One of the biggest reasons why these changes are coming is what happened between Ryan Preece and Kyle Larson at Talladega. When you saw that wreck, it looked absolutely really, really bad. And it's obviously no secret that the next-gen car ordinary hits are not being taken as well as like the catastrophic hits that have taken place so far with this car. So NASCAR has continued to make safety updates. And one thing, they actually did a crash test, I think, in Ohio, and they actually did show some crash test footage, which I think is really cool that they are doing that to give us a little bit of analysis. I thought the video yesterday was really, really good with Todd Gordon. I think he did a really good job, and they did a really good job explaining a lot about the next-gen car and talking about the front clips. Like I said, safety is absolutely the number one most important thing of a car. You got to have good safety. Yes, racing is absolutely important, but safety is a major, major aspect, and you got to have the safety in this car right, and you don't want these drivers getting hurt. We've had a lot of drivers sitting out, and nonetheless, I'm glad to see that NASCAR continues to make safety updates. They need need to continue making safety updates to the next-gen car, because otherwise it will become very, very unsafe. But nonetheless, very glad to see that NASCAR continues to make safety updates, and hopefully they will continue to make safety updates going forward to the next-gen car, because the more safe that the sport can be, the better, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lewis Hamilton. Now, Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace, I believe, were in the area because of the West Coast Hall of Fame that was going on. Obviously, Kurt Busch is being honored at the West Coast Hall of Fame. Toyota also is out there. Obviously, Toyota Save Bar is sponsoring this weekend for the Cup race at Sonoma. And Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace have both said in the press conference they would love to see Lewis Hamilton drive for 23XI Racing and drive the number 67 car. Now, it's already been announced that Kamui Kobayashi is going to drive the 67 car at the Indianapolis Road Course in about 2 months from now on August 13th. Will make his NASCAR Cup Series debut in that car. But it'd be really amazing for Lewis Hamilton to get a shot and an opportunity to drive for 23XI Racing. Lewis Hamilton is obviously one of the greatest race car drivers in the world and arguably one of the greatest Formula One drivers in the history of Formula One. And Lewis Hamilton has once or twice reiterated that he has been at times interested in racing NASCAR. During the Miami Grand Prix weekend about a month ago, he reiterated that he has shown some interest in wanting to race in NASCAR. I think Lewis Hamilton would be a really, really cool addition for the sport. He has a lot of fans, especially from the UK, who probably would be interested in watching that one race. And I know F1 fans would probably hate it because a lot of F1 fans do not like NASCAR. But overall, I think this would be a really, really big and a really huge move for the sport if Lewis Hamilton could come over. But that's not the only guy I really hope he gets to drive that car. The main guy I'd like to see get back in that car, though, is Kurt Busch. Now, Kurt Busch has not at this point been medically cleared to race. I think there's a chance he will come back in the not-so-distant future. Hopefully, I know that Kurt Busch has publicly said he wants to get back behind the wheel. If you want my prediction, I think the chance of him coming back could maybe be as early as the Chicago Street Course, but that's about a month from now, so I don't know. He's still got to be medically cleared to get back behind the wheel, but Kurt Busch is the main guy. There's other drivers I'd like to see. Obviously, they've got to be in the Toyota stable to get an opportunity to do that, or in the Honda stable, or the Mercedes, or whatever it is. I'd like to see someone come into play and drive for them. It'd be really fun. I think it's one thing that's so cool about the next-gen car, though, is that you get so many legends of other forms of motorsports. Kamui Kobayashi's coming into play. You got Shane Van Gisbergen coming into play and racing the next-gen car. You've had Jonathan Davenport from the dirt scene come and race Bristol Dirt. There's so many opportunities and so many advantages with the next-gen car, and honestly, I really love all the opportunities you get and the potential possibilities and the wild possibilities you get with the next-gen car. I really hope Lewis Hamilton, though, in all seriousness, does decide to come and race in NASCAR in the foreseeable future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Chase Elliott. Now, we've talked about Chase Elliott quite a bit this past week. Obviously, Chase Elliott was suspended for 1 race after intentionally right-rearing Denny Hamlin down the straightaway in the Coca-Cola 600. And we talk about Chase Elliott on Wednesday as well because Chase Elliott actually spoke to the media this past week, and he basically spoke that he thought it was a very unfortunate situation. He kind of agreed with NASCAR's call, and he said NASCAR did what they had to do. But he never really apologized to Denny Hamlin. He said that he's glad that Denny Hamlin was not hurt. But I'm not sure if he felt right about it. Basically, he thought maybe he was okay with the situation in some ways. Now, Rick Hendrick was in Le Mans as well. Obviously, Rick Hendrick is at Le Mans for the Le Mans 24 Hours. Hendrick Motorsports is a big part of that Le Mans 24-hour car. And Rick Hendrick spoke out to the media, and he basically kind of said that he understands NASCAR's decision and said NASCAR did what they had to do. But when you basically get run into the outside wall 2 or 3 times, you will get frustrated. Look, I do agree with Rick Hendrick that you can get frustrated as a race car driver, but what Chase Elliott did at Chicago, the Coke 600 was unacceptable and completely uncalled for. He did the same thing that Bubba Wallace did to Kyle Larson at Las Vegas. And guess what? He got suspended for it. Bubba Wallace did. Chase Elliott got the same penalty. NASCAR has been very consistent with the calls, and they made the right call right there. Now, Chase Elliott will likely speak to the media tomorrow, so we're going to have media availabilities likely tomorrow with Cup practice happening. But I think it's interesting to hear that Rick Hendrick kind of defended NASCAR a little bit, but also the same token kind of also defended his own driver as well, because NASCAR did what they had to do. And he's absolutely right. NASCAR did what they had to do, because what Chase Elliott did was completely uncalled for, completely wrong, and completely unacceptable. And Chase Elliott should know that. And this is definitely Chase Elliott's lowest point in his career so far. He's got to learn from it. I hope he can learn from this and grow up from this. He is a young driver. He's only 27 years old, so he's got time to learn. But that is the lowest thing you can do as a race car driver. I don't care who you are, whether you're Kyle Larson, whether you're Chase Elliott, whether you're Kyle Busch. If you do that, you rival somebody down the straightaway, you should absolutely be suspended. Kyle Busch had to happen to him in 2011. He got suspended for a whole entire weekend because of it. So NASCAR did the right thing, in my opinion. They made the absolute right judgment call. Not judgment call. This is absolutely the right call. And I think that they will all understand and appreciate that NASCAR made the right call right here. So it is what it is overall. We'll hear them probably more this weekend when Chase and Rick speak to the media once again. We had our first media availabilities, and Chase Elliott spoke about it. And there's going to be a lot of people talking about Chase Elliott this week. Maybe he'll have a shot to win at Sonoma, but we'll see what happens. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. Now, there was a tweet from Couch Racer. Now, Couch Racer obviously is run by Brett Griffin and Freddie Kraft, but they put out a very vague tweet. They do this sometimes, and they basically said that Kevin Harvick may not be the only full-time driver in the Cup Series that might retire or go away at the end of the 2023 season. Obviously, there's been some rumors about some drivers who could retire at the end of the 2023 season. The main guy that everyone's talking about, though, is Aric Almirola. Aric Almirola spoke this past week into the NASCAR media, and he said that he has still not made a decision in regards to his future, whether he's going to retire or if he's going to come back to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2024. He may come back next year, but also might retire at the end of the year. But from what some industry insiders have said, it does sound like there is a possibility, and a pretty strong possibility, that Aric Almirola could retire. Now, if Aric Almirola is to retire at the end of the 2023 season, who will take over for him? Well, the two front runners are Michael McDowell and Zane Smith currently at the moment. Now, the big thing that could hurt both drivers is sponsorship funding. Now, Smithfield could also return in 2024, but I think they're really committed with Aric Almirola. So it is very possible that that could end up happening, or someone else decides to go ahead and take over that ride. My biggest thing is I think it's going to personally be Michael McDowell is going to take the 10 car if Aric Almirola retires. Zane Smith is under a multi-year deal with Front Row currently at the moment right now, and I think that a lot of people believe that if Michael McDowell got a shot and opportunity in a better ride, well, I don't even think SHR is a better ride than Front Row, but if he got a shot in an SHR-like ride, I think he could do really, really good. And also, Drew Blickensderfer was Michael McDowell's crew chief when McDowell won the 2021 Daytona 500. So it's certainly possible is that could be who takes over that ride heading into next year. But it's going to be very interesting. And they mentioned there could be more that could retire. What about AJ Allmendinger? There's been rumblings going on. I know NASCAR Nostalgia posted on their social media page that Allmendinger may be back in the Xfinity Series next year, which I find very interesting. But AJ, he's been non-existent in Cup this year. What if he leaves the Cup Series and goes back to the Xfinity Series? That could be possible, but it's going to be very interesting nonetheless to see what happens. I know where I saw a lot of people mention Mark Truex Jr. I think Truex coming back next year. Truex has been heavily rumored in the recent weeks that he's likely going to come back. He said his decision is likely going to come by the end of this month, so we're likely going to know here very, very soon what Truex Jr.'s future is going to be, whether he's going to come back or whether he is going to retire. But my guess is that he is going to return in the 2024 season. Nonetheless, there could be some pretty big landscape changes heading into 2024. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, and nonetheless, we'll see what happens going forward into NASCAR's future, but we'll have to wait and see what happens and see what goes on when it comes to silly season, who decides to retire, and we'll see what happens in the foreseeable future. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Noah Gragson. Now, I did a little video discussing this tomorrow. I gave my initial thoughts on the situation. But it was announced yesterday early afternoon Noah Gragson will not be racing this upcoming weekend at Sonoma Raceway due to suffering concussion-like symptoms after a really, really bad wreck at Gateway. Grant Enfinger is going to substitute for Noah Gragson, will make his official NASCAR Cup Series debut. Grant Enfinger had attempted to make his Cup Series debut back in 2011, driving for Seneca Motorsports. They had actually talked to Kurt Busch, will go into 2012. But basically, Grant Enfinger will make his official NASCAR Cup Series debut debut. As Grant Enfinger drives for GMS Racing and Legacy Motor Club, they do have work because remember, Maury Gallagher is one of the owners of Legacy Motor Club. So therefore, Truck Series being off and Grant Enfinger being available, they decided to pick him up. Now, why is Noah Gragson out? Like I mentioned a second ago, it is due to concussion-like symptoms, suffer from a really bad wreck at Gateway. I can't remember how many laps ago the wreck was. I think it's maybe around 30 or 40 laps ago in the race. But Noah Gragson suffered a brake rotor failure. He's not the only driver that suffered brake rotor failures in the race. Carson Osabar, Tyler Reddick, and Bubba Wallace also suffered brake rotor failures. And instead of Noah Gragson going up into that outside wall like the other drivers end up doing, Noah Gragson tried to basically do what drivers do at Pocono, went to the bottom and backed into the outside wall really, really hard. Now, one of the questions is how long will Noah Gragson be out? I'm not entirely sure. Concussion-like symptoms are a thing that we really don't know what's going to happen. You could be out for a very short period of time or it could be out for a very, very long time. We're not sure, and we don't know how long he is going to end up being out. Now, there's been a lot of discussion also about the safety aspect of the next-gen car because this is the first concussion-like symptoms we've had so far in 2023, and we had two of those back in 2022 with the next-gen car with Alex Bowman and with Kurt Busch. Here's the thing I do want to mention. Was that a really bad wreck with the next-gen car? Yes, absolutely. But here's the thing. I think regardless of what generation of car that we see, I think that hit is absolutely going to hurt. It was a really, really bad wreck. For instance, look back at Casey Kane in 2013 with the Gen 6 car. Casey Kane, I think, almost back in the outside wall in New Hampshire, and he felt disoriented and really couldn't answer Dr. Jerry Punch's questions, which is not that hard to answer Dr. Jerry Punch's questions back in the day. But basically, he was very disoriented, and one of the biggest things I kind of think affected Casey Kane kind of was a big early reasons why he started indicating maybe he could retire in the future. But I think that hit, regardless, would have maybe been a concussion-like symptom. The hit was really bad, and Gragson just back in the outside wall extremely hard at like 150 or 160 miles an hour. My next thing I do want to mention is, first, I do want to send my thoughts out to Noah Gragson. Hopefully he can recover really, really soon and be back on the racetrack in the foreseeable future. We know the NASCAR has been working on the next-gen car, and obviously safety is the number one priority. We can't have drivers getting injured, but Noah Gragson is a young driver, and he made a little bit of mistake that caused it, unfortunately. But it's a really unfortunate situation. It sucks to see that Noah Gragson is not going to be in the behind the wheel this weekend. But this is also a really good opportunity for Grant Enfinger. I know the Legacy Motor Club has had a terrible year so far, but this is a great opportunity for Grant Enfinger to make his debut. But you think about Legacy Motor Club in general this season. Legacy Motor Club, terrible year this year. Both their drivers have been affected. Eric Jones got hit by a big penalty this week, and he was affected. So it's just been unfortunate year to be a Legacy Motor Club fan this year. Seeing this team struggle has just been really, really unfortunate and really, really tragic. And I really hope this team can get things figured out going forward. But again, my thoughts go out to Noah Gragson. It sucks to see the situation come into play, and we're wishing Noah the best and wishing him a speedy recovery. Again, regardless of the generation of car, if that hit could have been a concussion-like symptom, and it could have been big issues regardless. So, unfortunate situation ended up happening. Hopefully, we'll see Noah back behind the wheel in the foreseeable future, and things can be righted, and the ship can be righted for him in the future, be back behind the wheel. Maybe it'll be a one-week deal where he's back in Nashville, but if not, they'll probably have drivers on standby ready to go and race. So we'll see what happens, but really unfortunate situation ended up happening. Hopefully Noah will be back behind the wheel really, really soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. Now, this story came out of nowhere, but according to Adam Stern, NASCAR is in discussions with entities in Montreal about possibly bringing the racing track back to the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve as soon as next year, according to people familiar with them, with Cup as early as next year. For the first time in Cup Series history, sounds like Circuit Gilles Villeneuve could be on the schedule. Now, I have heard about this for a little bit now, that there has been conversations and talks. NASCAR has said publicly and has indicated publicly that they have wanted to go up to Canada and they have wanted to go to Mexico as well. There's also been rumors that Mexico could also be on NASCAR's next schedule. But Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, for those who are a little bit younger fans, they became fans in the last few years. Circuit Gilles Villeneuve was a road course that was in the NASCAR Xfinity Series from 2007 to 2012. And the racing at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, in my opinion, was always fabulous, fantastic, and also absolutely incredible. You could never have a bad race at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. You had a lot of chaos. You had the 2010 photo finish between basically I think it was Max Pappas and Boris Said. 2009 you had the great finish between Marcus Ambrose and Carl Edwards. 2008 you had the crazy rain race that ended up happening, the first race of rain tires. 2007 you had the chaos where basically Robbie Gordon thought he won the race. They probably should have won the race, and NASCAR kind of went overboard with the stuff because he got taken out by Marcus Ambrose, but he didn't drop back a little bit. He got spun out though, so he should have been second position. But I think NASCAR also knew that Marcus Ambrose was going to get dumped, so that's probably why they tried to also drop Robbie Gordon back in that situation. But this track never bat an eye, and I've been saying this for a long time, but I've missed the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve track being on the NASCAR schedule. But not just the fact it might be on the Xfinity schedule next or the truck schedule, they might be going to the Cup Series. And I've said this for a long time. I have always wanted a Cup Series day at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. I think the track always races great. I think it doesn't matter the car. I think the next-gen car would race extremely well at the track. And you think about the fanfare as well. This track always had people showing up, and the fans are always supportive of it. And the fact that they went away from this track when they did back in 2012, the reason they left this track in 2012 is to go to Mid-Ohio. We don't have the Xfinity Series racing Mid-Ohio anymore. They're basically, I think, at Portland now. But it really is just, I hope that this track truly gets back on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule. Because like I said, the racing at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve is absolutely incredible. It's absolutely fantastic. And I think that this track 100% deserves a NASCAR Cup Series date. And I think it will get back on the schedule. Now, the big question is going to be, what track will it replace? Well, I could absolutely see this replacing the Auto Club weekend. I'm not saying that we move this race to February. That's definitely not going to happen. But yeah, I could absolutely see this being a replacement for Auto Club weekend, because Auto Club is obviously not going to be on the NASCAR Cup Series schedule in 2024. It's actually not going to be called Auto Club anymore. It's going to be believed to be called Next Gen Speedway or California Speedway or something along those lines. I think it's going to be very interesting to see, but I think it will replace that weekend. Or my suggestion is if we can't get Chicago back on the schedule and Chicago Street Course ends up failing, that would be the replacement. I think a lot of fans would love that move. I think a lot of fans would be happy with that move going into the 2024 season. So I think it will get on the schedule. The fact that they're already in discussions and talking about it tells me that they are likely going to be on the schedule heading into 2024. I really hope it ends up happening. The track absolutely deserves a NASCAR Cup Series day. It deserves to be back on the Xfinity Series schedule, because especially if how good the Xfinity Series has raced in road courses, both Xfinity road course races were absolutely phenomenal and incredible. And also with no stage race, the race is going to play out. Field strategy is going to become a pretty major thing as well. So I'm excited about this. I'm telling you, if it does end up happening next year, woo, it's going to be a really good day for the sport. And I think that it's going to be announced in the future, because I think that Bob Parker's mentioned this, but the 2024 schedule, they're likely going to be starting on that in the future. I think a lot of the talks are going to mainly start here in the coming weeks. They're already starting to have discussions about it. I think they're waiting to see the feedback from the Chicago Street Course before they really do make an official deal in regards to that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in regards. Hopefully we get to see Montreal back on the schedule. The track absolutely deserves an opportunity to be back on the Cup schedule or be back on the NASCAR schedule in general. I really hope it ends up happening. And nonetheless, hopefully we get to see the return of this track here very, very soon. Let's see what happens. Hopefully Montreal gets back on the schedule. So that is going to today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Notifications on so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Link description below with that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think Circuit Gilles Villeneuve gets back on the schedule, or are you excited if it comes back on the schedule or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories discussed today on the channel? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Tomorrow on the channel is going to be a double upload day on the channel. We're going to have the video discussing Carson Osborne, where I think he's going to end up heading in 2024. And also going to have the Xfinity Series race review from Sonoma. And then on Sunday, we'll have the Cup review from Sonoma. And then on Monday, we got a news video dropping. And then Tuesday, we're going to have the biggest project on the show, maybe the longest video in the channel's history dropping. I think you're really going to enjoy it with a lot of content that way as we get close to the off week. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.